Hello, everybody. How's it going? My name is John Wie, the Content and Marketing Manager at the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, a member driven organization dedicated to the recognition and advancement of interactive entertainment. We hope you're both safe and well wherever you're watching from. I'm super excited to be here today to moderate this panel that we're calling Pixel Stories Reimagining Video Game Narrative for Comic-Con and Home 2020. So, what is this panel about? For many years, we continue to see game developers push and evolve the medium of video game storytelling in fascinating ways. Whether it's due to breakthroughs in technological advancements or different and unique perspectives, we as a gaming audience are constantly awed and inspired year after year. I'm joined by 4 of these talented and inspirational game writers who you'll meet very shortly as they help guide us through their experience of creating stories within games today. To help give you some context, let's check out a short video of these DICE Award nominated games written by each of our panelists. Take a look. Thank you, everybody here, for taking time out of your busy days to be on this panel. Could you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about the game you last worked on this past year?
I'm Clay Murphy. I am a writer at Remedy Entertainment, and this past year I was working on Control's DLCs as a lead writer. And if you're not familiar with Control, it's a new weird game about a woman in the weirdest, oldest house, haunted house thing in the world.
I'm Amelia Gray. I am a fiction writer and a screenwriter. I've worked on shows called Maniac and Mr. Robot, and the game I worked on is called Telling Lies. It's developed by Sam Barlow, and it follows 2 years worth of footage that a player can search through. It's kind of a desktop thriller, piecing together the story of an FBI agent going undercover with a protest group.
Good morning, or hello, whatever time of day you guys are at. My name is Aaron Contreras. I'm the narrative lead at Respawn Entertainment, and the most recent game we shipped was Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order.
Hey Comic-Con, my name is Jennie Kong. I am a narrative game writer at that game company. I am also a writer-director and have worked on a couple of other indie games as well.
Awesome.
And the latest game I'm working on still is Sky for that game company.
And just so everyone knows, we'll be talking about some story beats here and there, but we'll do our best to avoid major story spoilers. So let's go ahead and begin with our first question. I'm going to ask each of you to think back to your very first narrative gaming experience that made an impact on you. What impression did it leave you, and how do you feel that storytelling in games has evolved over the past few decades? And I'm going to go ahead and start with Jennie, if you would so kindly begin.
2 games that started this kind of process off for me was really Shinji Mikami's Resident Evil and Dino Crisis on PlayStation 1. And I think it's to do with the fact that it was a literal or proverbial page turner. I really wanted to open every door. I really wanted to see where the story led me, and the cinematic kind of storytelling of both those games, where the camera was placed, was really interesting. And I was on the edge of my seat, every time, just praying that I wasn't going to get killed by a dinosaur or a zombie. And then the other one was Eco, also on PlayStation. Again, just the idea that I felt like they put a completely different spin on the saving the princess kind of story. The idea that you would hold another, a character's hand to lead them through to safety and to see what kind of came out of that. I was very impacted by the emotions. I felt it was very profound, the way that you had to leverage your environment to kind of continue the story of where it would go, to discover who you are, who the other characters are. So I would say that those 2 were the pivotal moments for me.
Completely different. I was a Nintendo kid, so Link to the Past, or A Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past. Not really for the story, like, the kind of critical storyline of save the princess kind of thing, but more for how big the world felt back then, which is weird to say because now compared to games, it's like a pixel. But it was, there was like a witch in her hut. There were these gnomes making swords like past the woods. There were just so many little things I felt like I could just kind of keep going and keep finding, and like little stories that were just waiting kind of on the fringe for you to discover, as opposed to just kind of like being right in your face and having all this dialogue around it and all that. And it really kind of taught me what interactive storytelling could be, and leaving those breadcrumbs and those little small narratives for people to find. I always love that one.
Very cool.
I am a PC gamer from way back and still only do it. So my first ones were Grim Fandango, and but the first game, or Grim Fandango and the Space Quest series, and even King's Quest. The sort of unfolding narrative was fascinating to me from even way back then, like Clay said, when it was just a pixel in our parents' eye. But then I guess the GTA series, and then but the game that really I think like sparked it for me in terms of what felt like a sandbox was, and what felt like moral choices changing how your character is perceived, as the Fallout series, and particularly Fallout New Vegas. It's just like galaxy brain mind blown in terms of the ways that my decisions as a person could influence the way that I was seen in this world. Was just early mind blowing for me.
Really cool. And Aaron.
Well, I was scared when I realized I was going last, because I was like, for sure somebody's going to take mine. Like, I've just been anxious with every answer. It's really good responses, by the way. For me, it goes, because I'm really old, it goes all the way back to Ultima 4, Quest of the Avatar, with that opening where you create your character by choosing tarot cards in the Gypsy's hut, and just sort of how that pointed towards a game where, in a series where it kind of been about kill the bad guy, and sort of about like this sort of loot, smash, kill, mechanical RPG adventure. And then with Ultima 4, it became about not just what you did, but how you did it, and sort of like the virtues that you espoused in your play style. So that was a huge light bulb moment for me as to what games could be, that it was more than just sort of this numeric thrill ride. It was sort of, it had something to say about morality and the choices we made.
That's great. I think, going off of that, I think what's also interesting is that all of you come from these different genres and processes. When exactly did you get involved in writing the script, and how much change was there from pre-production to the game released? And if we could start with either Aaron or Clay, whoever wants to take the question first.
Go for it.
Oh, I was going to say you go for it. Too polite. I came on right as pre-production was wrapping up. So, I had an idea of what they were going into production with, but I wasn't involved from that kind of earliest stage. But I was honestly amazed. Like, this is my first kind of big budget AAA game that I've been on from start to finish. And I was amazed at how intact it stayed. Like, I always kind of figured, like, with all the moving parts and all the people involved and like all the months of work, it would start to kind of morph over time. But like, of course characters were cut, missions changed, like the flow drastically was altered every now and then by certain decisions or things we couldn't do. But like the core story remained the same by the end of it. And I was really happy to see that that's how games are made. Like, there's a vision, and then there's a product that delivers that vision.
Cool. I came on board JFO in August of 2017, and then we shipped in November of 2019, with a pretty specific release window in between The Mandalorian and Rise of Skywalker. And when I was there, our game director, Stig Asmussen, and Matt McNivitz, who was the first writer on the project, who had previous experience working on the Clone Wars and Rebels, had a draft of the story. So it was probably our first like rubber stamped, this is the story you're going to tell, in a document. It was sort of a beat sheet. And then we saw a lot of change over the next 2 years from there. Although I think the heart of the story and what it tried to do was very clear at that point in time, and that sort of helped us carry forward. Some characters lived or died, events swapped out, new characters were added in, other ones faded away. But for the most part, it was a matter of iteration, which is something that I always point to for game writing and game development, is that you're not just working kind of in a vacuum with your screenwriting software or word processor. You're working with a whole team, and in a AAA team, it's a very large team. So everything you write is going to get touched and manipulated, and it has needs that go past just the demands of story. Again, depending upon the kind of game you're working on. So there's tons of iteration over those 2 years.
A question for all of you as well is a little bit about the casting or character design, since we have a little bit of live action and gameplay. Was it all finalized by the time you began work on the game, or were there more less traditional routes? If anyone, Amelia, Jennie, wants to speak to this.
I could briefly. Because Telling Lies is structured completely live action, we're in a very similar to writing a feature on spec or writing a television show that hasn't been cast yet. We're kind of have people in mind and types in mind, but we don't have actual cast. And the casting process, it's a whole other animal with other people involved. But we were lucky to have who we got, and Logan Marshall Green and Alexander Shipp and Carrie Bichet and Angela Serafai, and it was kind of one of those brilliant moments when you make the product and then it draws kind of a great cast to it. That was our experience.
Gotcha. And then Jennie, if you wanted to speak a little bit about your experience as well.
Yeah, I think, that game company became, well, we've always been an independent studio, but then for this game, Sky, we became an independent publisher as well. And I think as a result, we got away with a lot of stuff that I don't think would hold if we had a publisher, where things like character design comes to the forefront pretty in the earlier stages, because they want to know that you're on track to, to showcase the game in its best light. But our character design actually came pretty late. Obviously, we had different iterations of what the Sky Children would look like. But because we built the world out first as the kind of the main process and focus, and to make sure, obviously, the kind of mechanical part of the game worked and everything. The character design of the player avatar came pretty late. We started with more of the like elder NPCs, and once we started to flesh the backstory, those were, had a strong inkling of what they would look like, including the other characters that you would meet along the way of each realm. But there were kind of 2 deciding factors, I think, that helped. The first one was visually. We made the player character very plain, so that you as a player would kind of attach yourself to that character pretty much from the get-go, and you could kind of explore that world through their eyes pretty much straight away. But we also looked at not only could you customize your own character, would it make sense, in a snapshot, would it work for the character to be with other characters as well, because we have like 8 players multiplayer at any one point in the game, drop in and out, new character, other friends playing in, they would be part of your crew, and then other people might fall out. So would they look right together? And then the other main thing that we thought about was basically going that extra step further, where the character was not only genderless, but also presented as equal, if you will. So it was never one that looked stronger or one that looked kind of, more skillful in any way. And that really helped with balancing the idea of democratizing the player, basically.
I guess, Clay or Aaron, for a AAA game, like, how was your experience with character design and motion capture and performance?
So for JFO, there was a lot of concept art when I came on board, and there was a pretty well realized identity of who the cast was going to be. And then naturally, once we started actually casting all those characters, they transformed, and that was really notable throughout the process of how kind of the story remained the same, but we started writing everyone totally differently. once we actually had real performers associated with them. And with every table read or rehearsal or shoot, we learned more and more about who this character really was, which made for some very late nights, I guess, while we were doing our performance capture process. But I think it paid off, where we kind of really tried to collaborate with the cast and take their voice of how they understood their role, and then kind of re-inject that back into the script as much as possible. So that was a huge part of the process for JFO. We also, as far as who was involved with that, definitely our game director, Stig Asmussen, myself, and the rest of the writing team. And then we included our performance director, Tom Keegan, and a VO lead, Harrison Deutsch. So those are sort of like the voices who were kind of in the room talking over talent as they came in. We tried to get a sort of a spread of representation across the development team to weigh in on how we felt a certain character was coming across.
Gotcha. And then Clay, what about your experience?
It was very different. I mean, Remedy kind of has its pool of actors it likes to go back to. So we have some kind of alumni from other Remedy games appearing in Control, and a lot of that was already determined by the time we were going into production. So some characters were even written for their actor. So we have the Trench character written for Matthew Peretta, who used to be Max Payne, for anyone who remembers that fun, slow shooting game. There was Matthew Peretta written for Darling, and that's Alan Wake, if anyone knows that. And then, of course, we brought Courtney Hope back as the lead in this one, Jessie, and she was in Quantum Break as a more side character, or main character, but still. Awesome. We wanted her to be the protagonist this time. So we kind of like to go back to our pool of people.
Very cool.
I have a question for you guys. Do you guys do a lot of, is there room for rewrites and going back and doing kind of pickup days or like additional mocap, or is it time is already running out and there's no way to kind of to update the game in that way?
It depends, but generally there's time. I mean, if we're missing something crucial, yeah, we can bring them back out. The problem for us is it's in Finland, so flying someone out for 2 lines to be picked up isn't really feasible in terms of like our budget or scope. I'm sure like in LA it's much easier, but it does happen quite often. I'd say like we do kind of space out shoots as well to happen over the span of months, so that way we can kind of reiterate between those shoots, and if we learn anything from the last one, react to it, get it in for the next one.
So we basically had to stick it on our first attempt because of the really accelerated schedule. Because again, we had a release window that was very important to hit, and things with story developed relatively late in the process. They found the fun with the gameplay early on, but myself and my team were kind of being brought on board as we were in full production. So there was a couple of reshoot days, but there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity to go back and change plot points. Certainly, we really had to hustle in that rehearsal and shooting process to make sure that we were adapting on the fly. So there's a lot of stuff happening on set to make sure that it kind of what we got at the end of the day would be functional. Yeah, it's good that we're in LA. That made those reshoot days easier. But we basically just had to stick it. So but we knew that going in, and I think that helped us kind of prepare ourselves mentally of like, all right, we need to take big swings and connect with the ball because we're not going to get another shot at this.
I actually heard that I wasn't on set for production, but I know that Sam Barlow's script coordinator had a program that if the actors ad-libbed or dropped a word accidentally or changed what they said, the script coordinator would plug it into the program and make sure it didn't mess up the structure of the game. So there was very little in terms of reshoots or space for error, or even like the actors came in and had to really nail it in terms of what was written, which is sort of a writer's dream and something that we don't usually get to do unless you're like Aaron Sorkin or something. So very spoiled.
I know we're running out of time a little bit, but I wanted to touch on a few quick general questions for all of you. If you had a little bit of patience with me here. We wanted to talk a little bit about the concept of moral choices in games, as Aaron was talking about, I think, in the intro. So what are all of your thoughts on whether giving players choices and moral agency, or layering the game with high moral stakes. Do you have any experience or inkling to explore this in your own projects or discussed it with your teams? And whoever wants to go first, feel free.
I think it's important that there are choices. I mean, games are an interactive storytelling medium, so the more we can encourage and explore ways to interact with character stories, plot, then we should, and invest ourselves more closely with the story. And I have done a little bit of it in the past, not so much, as a Telltale level, where it's literally that's the kind of mechanic. But I do think it's important that we explore more character-centric choices, that kind of speak more to a moral ambiguity, as opposed to those choices for drama's sake, which we do seem to see creep up in games quite often as a kind of pad out length. And then you always get those reviews where it gets called out for that kind of false involvement of the audience. That doesn't feel quite right when it's not too impactful. So it needs to be a very kind of carefully walked line.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I've been in complete awe of the team at Life is Strange, and playing other multi-branching certainly leans in that as part of its kind of structure and everything like that. But just being able to have game experiences that pose questions that maybe we wouldn't have posed in real life and can't pose because we're not in that situation, I think it's been really fascinating. And games like that, Detroit, Until Dawn, they've done a phenomenal job, and just really kind of excited to see other game creators kind of take that one step further and see what that's like.
Yeah, I see fiction and novels as such a, an empathy machine, and to me, games can be up there with that, the ability to insert yourself into a character and their story. And with a unique thing about telling lies is that the way that it forces you to examine your own biases in this way that I just kind of hadn't seen before in my experience playing games. The way that the story structure is completely constructed by your own biases, and by the amount that you trust a character or distrust a character, the way that you engage with their words, the way that you follow what they're saying, and it changes the ending, it changes the cutscenes that we show at the end, but moreover, it sort of changes the way that the story plays out, and your bias as a player unfolds the story in a different way, which I think is just fascinating, and it's something that you the closest kind of surrogate I found is in the novel, where you really just are inserted into the story, and even then you're being drawn along. So I think there's such an opportunity in games.
I look at it, the question of how do we do interesting moral choices in games is a pretty old one, and it's a difficult one for game teams to really address in a successful way. And when you do address it in a successful way, I think we recognize those brands for doing that well, right? That almost becomes what those games are about to a lot of us. I like to try and advocate that games be about something. So whether or not you're offering the player agency to choose which way the story is going to go, have a pillar on your team that you understand. This game is about blank, and we're going to look at the issues of blank, or sort of like, as Amelia said, it's an empathy machine for putting in the shoes of somebody who's undergoing blank. And that's one thing you can do, even if you don't have moral choice, to sort of raise in the mind of the player and the audience, like, those moral choices themselves, right? Just kind of even going through a relatively linear experience, they're going to be confronted with their own biases and their own reactions to things versus how the protagonist does it. On the flip side, if you do want to have moral choice and choice in the game that results in branching, you need to be really in sync with your designers and the development leads. And it's not something I think that writers can do all on their own. Because like on one end of the spectrum, with a game like Crusader Kings 2, right, you can make these big choices that literally change the fabric of history all the time, nonstop. But they've had to sort of model the way they do their realization of characters in the narrative to support that. You know, on the other end of the spectrum, you have a game that's got a lot of performance capture, live action video, and of course, you're going to have just less ability to do that because the cost to sort of support branching choice there is going to be prohibitive. So understanding what your design is and kind of figuring that out early on, where I think where a lot of teams go wrong is they leave like, oh yeah, and we'll have really meaningful moral choices, not like those other games on the chalkboard or the whiteboard for a really long period of time, and they don't do the work to figure out how do we get there, and then eventually those things go away over the course of development.
Or you have a cutscene that just doesn't, it just does not stack up when you get there, and that's disappointing when that happens.
Maybe that time and that effort would be better spent just having one cutscene that sort of looked at both sides of the issue in a way that was more nuanced and authored, right? It's every solution's different, but yeah, that's a great example.
Again, for the group, are there any gameplay trends or technological advancements across the industry that you're most excited about in terms of affecting narrative, or any trends you even hope to see in the future?
I'm super excited that we're seeing a generation of game writers now who have always wanted to be game developers. Like they're kind of growing up now thinking like, I want to make video games, where I think that was always me, but I think I'm old enough that I was a bit of an outlier for that, where I never wanted to write a novel or a movie. This has always been my jam. So I think seeing like all this young talent come up who understand the art form and the medium is just really exciting, because they're going to take it to places that we haven't even imagined yet, especially since they tend to be more technologically proficient. They can jump into the engine and they sort of understand the nuts and bolts of what they're doing, both in a writing skill sense, right? They're sort of like working with all the writing dramatics, and then they're also understanding game logic. So I'm super excited about that.
I'm really into these games that have no dialogue, which is really weird for me to say because that's my job and I get paid to do it. And if I don't write dialogue, I can't eat. But like Journey, Inside, Little Nightmares, like all these games that are just storytelling based on the worlds that you see and interact with. And it does like tell a complete story the entire way through, but it never has a single word of dialogue except for chirping. Sorry, Jenny. But like I just think that's really exciting. Like it's a really cool way to explore games, and like it's like a silent film approach, and it's really neat to see that's kind of trending upwards and becoming more and more curated and like in depth. I don't know. I'm into it. Keep making
Yeah, I feel like for me it's I mean, technology will continue to break new ground and everything with every new generation, and it'll be like Westworld in the future, where there opportunities of interactivity will be kind of go beyond the screen, if you will. But for me, it's just a genre of different stories that are being told, and that's kind of the most exciting thing for me, because obviously with new genres come kind of new emotions and new opportunities to interact. So that for me is kind of the area that I'm most interested in.
Yeah, I as kind of a outsider in terms of knowing game mechanics and how things work, I most selfishly interested in stories that can be told narratively, in the kind of standard script way, stories that I've got this like idea for a game that I think unfortunately can only be told in extremely immersive VR that doesn't quite exist yet. But that kind of like I think it's my narrative brain that causes that to feel like the go-to. But these kind of expansion in diversity of narrative and diversity of people making the narrative, I think is things that I'm excited to get on board with.
Very cool. And as kind of our wrap-up question, pretty much talking to Aaron's point, what advice would you give to aspiring game writers that want to jump into the industry?
Start doing it. Just Twine is a great tool to try out kind of how branching dialogue works and folds back into itself. Like just start making games with hobby groups you can find on Reddit or Facebook in your area, kind of thing. I mean, just don't wait, because it's hard to get an entry-level position in a proper AAA company. So don't shoot for that right away. Just kind of build your way up. Start now. Keep going.
I personally feel like anyone wanting to get into this medium really truly have to love video games, because it's not the, you know, the guys here have mentioned that it's not a solo process. You don't kind of, you're not opening up Final Draft and kind of cranking out these kind of, you know, cutscenes by yourself. So much of it is a partnership with designers and, you know, the art team, music team, and beyond. I do feel that, you know, start playing games, maybe gravitate towards a specific type of game that you enjoy, and kind of go from there. And, you know, kind of see where it leads you, really. But just really understanding the process that writing for games is more like a dance with the player, rather than like, you know, asking them to get in the car and driving them to a destination, because it's kind of so much more than that. That the player interactivity and their player agency and choices is really, you know, 50%, if not more, of the experience.
Yeah, I think for me, it's sort of holistic, I guess, but find your people and find your crew. You know, when I first started writing, I was writing flash fiction short stories that, you know, were completely unpublishable in my estimation. But I found these two guys in Chicago who gave me $1,000 to put them out as a book, and it was my first entry into, you know, weird lit, surrealist fiction. You know, my strange little crew, which kind of started me on this journey that has got me here. And it's like, and the equivalent, I really like Clay's advice too, to just like do it, you know, find, like, open it up and get into it, and you know, lean into who you are, whoever that is, and you know, the thing that makes you special is the thing that'll make a special piece of art, whether it's a game or a story or a comic or anything.
I took the longest and weirdest route to end up in game development ever. Like, I made every mistake along the way. So I don't know how good any advice I would have for people. I guess education in writing as a craft, I'd recommend for anybody who wants to be a game writer. You can pick that up outside of the industry. And then, as others have said, get in the industry, get making stuff in any capacity, whether it's indie, whether you're AAA, going through the process of seeing what it takes to put a game together and ship it from the inside is going to be transformative, and kind of let you know whether or not, if this is the life that you want to live, really. Past that, I'd say if you want to do it and you're persistent, you're going to win. Like, they can't stop you from becoming a game writer if that's what you want to do, if you want it bad enough. So take heart in that. And probably I'd say to develop the skill of accepting feedback and critique from all sources, because there's no writer in this industry who doesn't get notes from every direction, and we all have to process that in a positive way. And the sooner you kind of develop the muscle to react to that, and basically have people who don't like your work even telling you how they don't like it, will make you a much better contributor to the project.
That's all really great advice. And, you know, one thing I think we can all say for everyone here is that you're all terrific writers. You all have made terrific products, and we really do appreciate, I'm sure, both the people watching and myself included. Thank you for all the games that you have made. And I guess just as a closing kind of statement from each of you, could you just give a social media handle or where people could follow you for your updates and work, and any other quick shout out you want to make?
So polite.
Go, Clay. You spoke first.
Go on, Clay. You
Dive
take
in
this
there.
one.
Broke that. Yeah. I don't know. My name's Clay Murphy. I already said that. I'm on Twitter as your pal Clay. AWE, the second DLC for Control, is going to be coming out sometime soon. TBD on the date. I don't think I should be saying that. Maybe. Anyway, you'll find it.
Not soon enough, Clay. Not soon enough. Get back to work.
Good answer, Aaron. Aaron's just answering my questions better than I am, so I'm here.
I'm Aaron Contreras, just my first name, last name on Twitter. You can find me there, or I work at Respawn, so Respawn's good.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Gray Amelia. That's Gray. The Amelia Gray with the Grey is a romance novelist, and she is my enemy.
I'm Jennie Kong, JennieKong, at first name, last name. On Twitter, Sky is launching its latest season next month, So excited to kind of invite everyone to check it out. I'm also working on a couple of indie game projects, but I don't think they're announced yet. So hopefully we can share more info about that soon.
Thank you again for tuning in to our Comic-Con at Home panel. For more information about the AIAS, as well as to donate to our scholarship program, check out interactive.org or @official_AIAS on Instagram and Twitter. You can also check out The Game Maker's Inside Story, a digital series that explores the unique process of interactive storytelling, design, and directing, available on major streaming platforms. Stay safe and well, and once again from all of us here, thank you so much for watching. Take care.